Hi there, I'm Kian Cruz, author of Dad Bod, and you're listening to Pop Goes Your World.
If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes. And while you're there, please leave us a rating and review.
And now it's time for our feature presentation.
I'm Chris McBrien, and the pop culture from Generation X is everything to me.
And I'm Derek Myers, and I'm here to educate Chris on the great pop culture of today's generation.
Episode 302, Revenge of the Nerds movie review. Chris McBrien, along with your co-host Derek Myers, and this is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. This week, my turn to pick a movie for us to watch and review. I mentioned last week that I attended the Hamilton Comic-Con a couple weeks ago, and I met the three stars of Revenge of the Nerds, Booger, Ogre, and Lewis. So it only seemed appropriate, I felt, to go back and watch that movie. So we're going to get to our full review of that shortly. It should be interesting. But first, what pop culture have you been able to take in over the last couple of weeks, Derek? So we were away last week, actually.
We were indeed. And
Yes.
That gave me plenty of time to watch a whole bunch of stuff. So I will do my best to keep this as brief as possible. But every time I say that, it extends on and on.
That's okay.
So I'm going to work
Educate
backwards.
me.
I've got some movies and some TV. I'm going to talk about the TV first. Actually, and I've got music. I'm going to talk about music first. So my wife and I bought concert tickets. We are going to see the Canadian band Our Lady Peace doing a little tour right now. And the opening band is Collective Soul. So two bands that were really
They're
big in the
American,
90s.
right?
I believe they are, yes.
I think so, yeah.
And again, two bands that I like and I've never seen perform live. They're actually not coming to Toronto, where I live. They are coming to Oshawa, which is about a 45-minute drive from here. It's a much smaller, more blue-collar towns where the auto plants are. And so we had to actually buy tickets from the venue, and it's the hockey arena where the Oshawa Generals play, the OHL team. So it was an interesting ticket purchasing experience. I'm so used to doing things through Ticketmaster. It was both nice and difficult to go to another site, but whatever. Anyway,
and might I say that's a very tactful way of describing Oshawa.
Yes. Hey, we may have listeners in Oshawa. I think if I remember correctly, our good friend Greg lives in Oshawa. Right. So, although he probably would describe it differently, he has firsthand experience. Anyway, so that's my music news. I got tickets to see Our Lady Peace and Collective Soul. I think the concert's in March, if I remember correctly. It's sometime next year. So looking forward to that.
They're both bands that were big in the 90s.
Yeah, and both bands that I really like. So I am looking forward to it. I have never seen either one of them before, so that was good. There was some other band opening up that I never heard of. I think they were a smaller local band kind of thing. So, TV. So being the fall, we're getting some new TV shows are starting on network television and even on some of the premier cable channels. And then we have other ones that are, shorter runs. So I think I may have mentioned previously, one of the shows that I really enjoy is on HBO, one of their prestige drama shows called Industry. The third season just wrapped up. It was 8 episodes. The final one was last week. Fantastic show. If you're not watching Industry, I strongly recommend you go back and watch it. It's about young people joining the work world in the trading, like stockbrokers and traders and bankers and stuff in Britain. So it takes place in London, although there are a handful of Americans in the cast. It's fantastic. The writing's great, performances are great, the storylines are great, and there's no hold barred. Like, this is definitely like a hard R rating. Like the things that these people do both while they're at work and when they're not at work is very risque, but it totally makes sense for their various characters. Some of the characters are very well off and are sort of working to pass the time, and other characters are super poor and are working hard to try and get a leg up. It's a really interesting show. It's really good. Anyway, the third season just ended. And 2 thumbs up from me. I'm sure when we get awards season come around next year, Industry will be nominated for a bunch of stuff. It was that good. I think they're sort of positioning it as the successor to the show Succession. So,
sorry, what streaming service is that on?
It's on HBO, or in Canada here we get it on Crave.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, fantastic. there's also a brand new show that then just started this week in industry slot called The Franchise. It's a short, it's 30-minute episodes. It's sort of a comedy satire, and it's takes place behind the scenes on a movie set. And the franchise that they're talking about in the title is supposed to be like a Marvel-style superhero film franchise where they're in the process of making this special effects movie, and they have performers who are like, I have 30 years of theater experience. And so like that guy doesn't understand, like, what am I performing against? And they're like, well, we're going to put some special effects behind you on the big screen. And like the guy just doesn't get it, kind of thing. But then you have like, the show focuses around, I think the guy's supposed to be the first assistant director. And so he's the main guy. And then the director is also an actor you recognize. So again, it's a lot of European actors that I don't know the names of, but I'm like, oh, I recognize that guy. It's a big cast of British performers. And again, I think if you work in the industry, in the TV and film industry, there's a lot of like inside baseball going on. So you'll probably get a lot more out of it. I found the first episode, it was like 25 to 30 minutes, was like a lot to take in. But I think it did a good job of sort of setting the expectations. It's getting a lot of fantastic reviews. I would not be surprised if this thing does very well, but it slid right into industry's time slot. So it worked perfectly for me. When that one wasn't on this week, I just watched the first episode of The Franchise. And then on regular TV, I don't remember what network, but there's a new medical drama called Brilliant Minds. It stars Zachary Quinto, who people may remember played Spock on the Star Trek reboots of the movies. He was also one of the guys in the TV show Heroes way back when. Anyway, Zachary Quinto, basically, this new show is sort of like House MD, where in the House television series, House was brilliant and cranky and nobody liked him and he was a curmudgeon and he just did his own thing. Well, in this one, the guy is also doesn't necessarily follow the rules and he's a little off center, but it's sort of the opposite of House, where it's like he cares about the patients so much he has to break the rules to care for the patients, and he wants patients none of the other doctors will work with because they're difficult. And so if you liked House, this one sort of feels similar, even though the doctors are sort of polar opposites. And I mean, Zachary Quinto doing a decent enough job. So I think there's 3 or 4 episodes have dropped so far. I've just been watching it week to week. It's not bad. I mean, I would probably give it like a B- and see where it goes. For network TV, it's doing a pretty good job. And I find most of the new network shows kind of suck. But in any case, that's what I've been watching on TV.
Nice.
Are you watching any TV these days, Chris? Anything?
Well, you know how much I love game shows. Or should I say,
don't we all?
Old game shows? Because I know you like the newer ones. So one of my favorite game shows, probably my number one favorite of all time, is Tattletales. So
why? It's so bad.
It's so great. So it's on every afternoon on the Game Show Network.
I know. It's terrible.
Needless to say, my PVR is like packed full. I love that show. So my wife says to me the other day, she's like, what the hell's going on with our PVR? It's almost full. 98 episodes of Tattletales? She overreacts to everything, I tell you.
Oh my God.
But anyway, so I need to start going through some of these, right, and clearing up the PVR, probably so she can just record crap like Love is Blind. That's her new obsession.
I don't even know what that is.
It's just crap. So anyway, I put an episode of Tattletales on yesterday. And then I'm going to start watching this because I do like that show. So I don't know if you know the concept. You probably do, Derek, but most of our listeners probably don't know.
I'm sure they don't. And believe me, you're not going to be wowed when you hear it. Yeah,
they're not all old like me. So the concept of the show is they get 3 quote unquote celebrity real life couples. And then they usually put the women backstage and they ask the guys questions. And then they bring the women on one by one to see if they can guess the answer. It's kind of like Celebrity Newlywed Game.
It's not anywhere near as exciting as a Newlywed Game. Yeah. I just want to set expectations for people who may think, I want to watch this.
Nah, it's pretty good. And like I like the set. It's like that lime green set. It's very, very 70s and 80s.
It's very dated.
Very dated.
Of its time.
Let me tell you, it's dated in more ways than one. Mm-hmm. So the girls go off stage and the host is Bert Convy. So he asks the guys this question. He says, gentlemen, you're stranded on a deserted island for 10 years with only your wife and your best male friend. Would you or would you not share your wife with your friend?
Jeez. Wow.
I'm like, what? Like, I spit out my drink. Like, this is an actual question on an actual game show on national television. I mean, I get it was like 1978, but I mean, still, like, what the living hell?
Jeez.
So it implies a few things, not least of which is the fact that women are treated like man's property,
No kidding.
in 78. And like he gets to decide if he's going to share her sexually with the other guy. Like, oh my God. I was just like, I cannot believe it. But I think it sets the stage maybe for the movie we're going to discuss this week, because times were truly different back then. Thank God for progress. Thank God.
Wow.
They're not the same. But anyway, very interesting. So I also have this.
Here's your dad joke of the week.
All right. So Derek, a man at the grocery store is buying 1 banana, 1 apple, and 2 eggs. And the cashier says to him, "Oh, you must be single." And the guy says, "Yeah, how do you know?" And the cashier says, "Because you're ugly."
Wow, I didn't expect that. That was pretty good.
All right. Is that a pledge pin on your uniform?
Doctor.
Doctor Detroit. Oh, yes, the Haile Selassie Pavilion. Oh, yes.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Whiskey.
Fun prophylactic, soiled.
Bring him home.
You're my friend. I'm going to try and help you.
Randy Jackson from the Jackson 5.
Really?
In Philadelphia, it's worth $50. Stop! Look at that escargot. So, Derek, a couple weeks ago, we did our 300th episode. And one of the things that you and I discussed was how we'd like to go back and sort of redo maybe a few of our early episodes, especially since Yancey used to be on the show, and how you, Derek, you didn't get a chance to discuss some of those things. One of the movies that we reviewed back in season 1, I think it was, maybe season 2, was Revenge of the Nerds. Basically, all it was me getting Yancey to watch a movie he'd never seen before and getting his reaction to it. So this time around, I'd like to attack this movie from a few different angles. So I want to talk about how it comes off through the lens of 2024. I want to talk about some of the themes in it, and then we can, do our usual look at, scenes and quotes and box office and cast. We always do that. But first, Derek, you watched the movie this week for the podcast, obviously.
I did, yes.
So maybe you can get us started, first of all, mentioning like how long it had been since you'd seen this movie previously.
Sure.
And just what your first impressions were.
Okay. So let me start at the beginning. So the first time I ever saw this movie would have been in the mid to late 80s. So I would have been maybe 12, 13 years old.
Okay.
We could chalk this one up to another movie you saw when you were way too young. Yeah, this definitely falls into that category.
For sure.
And obviously saw it on home video because, wasn't seeing this one in the theater. And as a young, pubescent boy, the boobs certainly got my attention, but it's a dick and fart joke movie. Like a lot of it appealed to me, to my very young boy sensibilities, even though a lot of the jokes I didn't really get until I was watching it years later. I was like, oh, that's what that's really talking about, kind of thing. Not that there's a ton of that in there. I mean, a lot of it is just sight gags and very obvious, humor.
Right.
So I immediately, as a 12 or 13-year-old boy, fell in love with this movie, watched it over and over again. Eventually, it was on one of the movie channels and I recorded it. So I had my own copy. I would say between, let's say it was 1987 when I first saw it. That's probably about right. I would say between like 87 and 97, I probably watched this movie like 20 times at least.
Yep.
Like in its entirety. And that's not including when you just, oh, hey, look what's on. We're just going to watch this 15-minute scene and then we're going to change it to something else. So I have a rich history with this movie. I could probably rewrite the script from memory. Like I know this movie backwards and forwards, or at least I thought I did. I actually found a lot of new things when I watched it this week. So yeah. Fondness for this movie that goes way, way back. The nostalgia factor, huge for me. Obviously, though, over time, as you get a little older, a little more mature, times start to change, in many cases for the better. And you start to look back on some of this stuff and you're like, oh boy, man, a lot of this stuff is very problematic. Some of this does not age well, and some of this was downright deplorable when it happened, but we all went, ha ha ha, isn't that hilarious? And other shows, other movies, other podcasts have actually made fun of Revenge of the Nerds in many ways. Like one of the shows that I like is Robot Chicken. It's a show on Adult Swim on the Comedy Network that does they have like action figures and puppets and stuff, and they really dive into that nostalgia, and they really like try and poke fun at the things that you think you love in many ways. Many times they do it in the most outrageous ways. And they have a couple of Revenge of the Nerds sketches that they do in Robot Chicken that are like a spot on commentary 25 years later, looking back by people who loved the movie growing up. And so again, I find that this movie has become both a punchline and a cautionary tale, and neither of those things in the way that I think the movie was originally intended to be. And we can talk more about that as we go through. Mm-hmm. I hadn't actually sat down to watch this movie from start to finish in one sitting in probably 20 years. I think it's safe to say it's been 20 or even more. Now, it's occasionally it's on one of the movie channels, and I'll be flicking around and go, hey, it's Revenge of the Nerds. And I'll watch 5 or 10 minutes and be like, okay, I got to go make lunch. So I've seen bits and pieces, or for some reason they show it on AMC and they cut out all the nudity, all the swearing. The movie's like 20 minutes long. And so again, when I see it's on one of these channels where they're editing it for TV, I don't even bother. Cause it's like, what's the point?
Right.
It'd be like, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, although I have this rich history with this movie, I hadn't actually sat down to watch it in a long time. So I sat down and I watched it. And let me tell you, knowing there were certain things that I knew right up front I was going to have a problem with, and we'll talk about some of these things. I loved this movie. It is so good.
Too. Yep.
I was amazed at how well I felt it held up despite some of the problems, and how relevant I felt the message still was, even though the movie has its issues. Again, we'll get into that. I laughed a lot. Like, I laughed out loud, even though I knew the jokes and I knew it was coming. Seeing it in its proper context from start to finish, watching it intently, giving it my absolute attention, and having not seen it and coming to it with this fresh perspective, I was pleasantly surprised at how much I enjoyed it. And I was kind of worried, if I like this movie as much as I think I'm going to, like, does that make me a bad person? And we'll talk about the problems with the movie, because definitely there are problems with the movie. But overall, I was like, wow, this movie is still really funny. So
I agree with everything you're saying, and I really think we need to dive in this a bit, because so when I had Yancey watch this back in season 1, I actually didn't go back and watch it prior to recording that episode. So because we weren't going to do a deep dive on the movie, I just wanted to get his reaction, his sort of broad strokes take on the movie. So I wanted his perspective as a millennial, who did not grow up back in the 80s watching this movie.
Right.
So when I watched it for the podcast this week, it'd been about 15 years since I last saw it.
Yeah, so it'd been a while for both of us. Yeah.
So here's the thing. Whenever this movie gets brought up, you are 100% right. We always hear those same general takes on it. Like, it's dated, it's racist, it's misogynistic. And I get it, because it is all those things. Those things they have some prevalence in the film. But I think you have to take it at face value. It is a time capsule of the early 80s.
Yes.
And the movie's detractors, and I've heard this over and over again, they say that, in addition to being dated and racist and misogynistic, it's illegal, or at least the characters do several illegal things. So let's just break down some of these things. So let's start with the racism. So one of the problems Yancey had when he watched this movie was the character of Takashi. Yancey basically said that, he's like, the joke is basically that he's Asian,
Yes.
And it's just, it's racist. And he's right. And he's right. It's racist. But I was able to find where Brian Toshi, the actor who played Takashi, gave an interview. And this is his quote, okay? He said, "I got so much crap from Asian entities, newspapers, commentators, and groups saying that I was perpetuating this Asian stereotype. But what made it different with me, first of all, at the time, I was one of the very few Asian actors in TV or film. So yes, it was a stereotype, but we were playing real people. We had heart, and the film had heart. So I thought, screw them, you know?
Yeah.
And that's his quote. And I think it's interesting because, I mean, it really does always come back to the fact that an actor's job is not to be funny. An actor's job is to find the truth. Writers write. They're supposed to be funny.
Yep.
Actors got to find the truth. And when you go back and watch this, I agree. I feel like a lot of these actors are just playing these people with a heart. Like they're playing actual people. So
yes. Yep.
So I don't know. So yeah, there is some racism, I guess, you know, but I mean, it's also, again, a slice of, you know, what the early 80s Reagan era, you know, life was like, and it was not great. It just wasn't.
Well, it was not great if you were not a straight, white, conservative, heterosexual male. I mean, if you were anything else, it wasn't great. So it's and I did find that, you know, just to sort of piggyback on what you're saying, because I agree with it. That's a great quote. The more I was watching the movie, the more I was trying to put blinders on, where it was like, they didn't pick on the Asian guy because he was Asian. They didn't pick on the black guy because he was gay or because he was a person of color. They didn't pick on the little kid because he was a little kid and, you know, had the glasses. They didn't pick on Poindexter because he wore a suit and had funny glasses. All of them were just painted with the same brush, nerd. And I liked that because I felt that I don't want to say excused the rest of it, but it to me it was, we're not being racist. We're not being misogynistic. We're not being, you know, they were being mean and hateful and spiteful, but it had nothing to do with any of the bigger picture issues that could have very, very easily derailed this, right? If it was a black fraternity and they were picking on them, okay, well, now you're going into the hate crime territory. But the fact that it was like all of these groups that were all considered outcasts, that were all considered, like, what's the speech he does at the end, sort of to step on the end of the movie, where he says, he goes, you know, whether he ever felt picked on and put down or spit on or called a dork or a spaz or a geek or whatever, you know, again, they don't say, if you're gay, if you're a person of color, if you aren't the most pretty person in the world, they, you know, they're talking more about, if you don't feel like you're one of the, quote, beautiful people. I think he even uses that. He goes, you know, there's more of us than there are of you. And that was one of the things that really resonated with me this time through. That, I mean, it always had, but even more so this time was, it wasn't that the alpha betas, you know, they're mean-spirited and their hate was directed towards these characters because they were nerds, not because of those other things. Anyway, it really jumped out at me more this time than it had in the past.
I agree. I feel like the whole concept of nerds is all encompassing in this film. And that's why they do a lot of this stuff with, you know, the different races and like you said, like with, you know, the sexual orientation and things like that. It's that it's really an all encompassing thing for marginalized people.
Yes.
That's what it's kind of a catch-all.
Yes.
So I want to talk a little bit about crimes, because I was listening to a podcast.
I made a list.
I listened to a podcast once, and the hosts were discussing this movie, and they brought on this legal expert who itemized the crimes that were committed in this movie. It sounds like you made yourself a list as well.
I have a list here of 2 columns, the alpha betas and the trilambs.
Okay.
And honestly, by the end of the list, the alpha betas seemed like they were much worse off than the trilambs, except for the fact that, you know, Gilbert rapes Betty. But, you know, not that that's forgivable, but
there's a website called IllinoisLawyers.com, and they listed out the crimes that were committed in this film. So they include the most obvious one, the one you just mentioned, where Lewis has sex with Betty by stealing the mask of a boyfriend.
I can't remember what they called it. It's like
rape by deception.
Assault. Deception. That's the term that kept coming up. Yeah.
You know, the thing is, you know, going back and thinking, you know, when I was 14 years old and first saw this movie, like, I guess it didn't seem like that big of a deal because you're watching, because, you know, she ended up liking it, but it is clearly rape.
Non-consensual.
Like, it's not good.
Yeah.
So that is, I think, one of the worst crimes committed in this movie, but there's a lot more. Did you want to mention a couple? Because I listed them out as well.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll start going down my list. So since we're talking about the Land of Dilemmas, so when they do the panty raid, there's a lot. They obviously break in. So break in, entering. They straight up go in. They break in. They steal her panties, and there's that. They put the cameras in their dorm and watch them and take videos of them, and then they take still pictures from that and distribute them in the pies. So that's it. And
felony revenge porn. Yeah, I guess. And they let Wormser, an underager, watches these things. Yeah,
we'll talk about that a little bit later as we go through the scenes. They put the liquid heat in the jocks, which I guess would constitute some form of assault. Yep.
Chemical weapon batteries.
Yeah, sure. Like so those were sort of my big ones from the lambdas. On the alpha betas, I mean, they burned the house down. Deliberately burned the house down and then lie about it. So, I mean, there was probably some sort of insurance fraud going on there. Like that was clearly arson or some variation of that. They throw the rock through the window. Nerds get out. So there's the vandalism and by extension, the hate crime that goes with that. Later in the movie, they have the burning nerd sign outside their dorm. Clearly, if that had been a burning cross, they'd be in prison, but they let it go. And at the end of the movie, of course, the alpha betas just straight up destroy the house. And again, if they ever got caught for any of that stuff, like all of that gets painted with the hate crime brush. Like they're all going to prison for a long time. So
there's more stuff that jocks
There were probably more, but those were sort of the big ones that I was noting as I was going through.
So, bestiality. There was.
Well, I wasn't sure about that because they give some. He goes, "What do brothers? What do we mean them for?" And then you see the goat or the sheep. It's
you have to figure that happened because then they come back and they're like tarred and feathered, which is like aggravated battery. When they unleashed all the pigs in the nerd house, that's like animal cruelty and stuff like that. And when Ogre is holding that guy off the balcony, like that's attempted murder.
Just lets him go.
Yeah, so there's all these kind of things, and then there's random crimes throughout the movie too that are things like even just like the old woman hitting on Wormser. The college lets him get drunk in the one game that they play. And John Goodman definitely encourages arson and violence and, threatens a dean and stuff like that. But here's my take on all this. So all that being said, because I listened to that podcast and they listed all this stuff. And I want to be perfectly clear, Derek. I do not condone any of these things in any way, shape, or form. But here's my take that I want you to consider. It's a movie.
Yes.
Illegal crimes take place in movies all the time.
I agree.
Do we always vilify the movie for it? Movies contain crimes all the time. If you watch a Schwarzenegger film, there's violence, there's murder. I mean, Doc Brown in Back to the Future illegally stores nuclear materials in his house. Twilight is about a vampire having sex with an underage girl. Ocean's 11 is about armed robbery. Home Alone has got burglary and shoplifting and violent assault. Ghostbusters break every single bylaw in New York City. Scarface, one big crime spree. Pulp Fiction, it's all about mob assassins and murder and rape. So I just want to be clear. I'm not saying that anything that the characters do in Revenge of the Nerds is right or even justifiable, but movies are movies. They're not real. So instead of breaking down every law that gets broken in a movie, how about we just approach it as fiction? That's my take.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good way to do it. And even with some of the things, especially with the Land of Lambdas, when they go on the panty raid, again, that's a product of its time. Like, I got to think in the 70s and 80s, that happened at a lot of dorms and nobody considered it a crime. Again, assuming that all they did was broke in, looked at the girls and stole their underpants.
Panty raids were a thing.
I figured it's, again, I hate to use this term, sort of the boys will be boys, because it's so bad, for what it implies.
Absolutely.
But of its time in the context, I think that was just accepted as this is the kind of prank. We'll call it a prank. This is a prank that gets done on campuses all the time. And so now, again, the camera's definitely a push over the top, but to your point, I like the way you put it. We're not forgiving it, we're not condoning it, but why vilify this movie crime by crime, point by point? Just call it a movie and take the bigger picture.
And let's just like talk about it right away, because this rape by deception scene is the big one. This is one a lot of people talk about, and I get it. The scene is very problematic, but basically the actors and director, they've all said that their intention was never rape. Their intention was to have Lewis get the girl. Now, I think Timothy Busfield put it best. He once said in an interview, and I quote, "This movie would have been just fine without that scene. He could have found another way to win the girl over."
Yeah.
And I agree.
I agree.
That's great,
In retrospect, I mean, I agree it should have been that way in the first place. But again, in the time, in the moment, like it got approved by a lot of people to get made and put on screen. And a lot of people saw this movie and didn't have a big problem with it or didn't talk about it as being problematic for years. Again, not to forgive it or condone it, but sort of it is of its time, and not that that's an excuse, but yeah.
And I think it also speaks poorly to the female character. Like, she's mean and she's cruel, but only when she has sex does she see the error of her ways. I think Timothy Busfield was right. I really liked his take. So Steve Zacharias is one of the screenwriters. So later on, he had to adopt this movie for a play. Apparently, they made a musical based on this movie. Okay. So in it, the writers changed it so that Betty got thrown off the cheerleader squad for flunking trigonometry, and Lewis tutors her and wins her over. So there are other ways, better ways for him to win the girl, full stop, no question. But the scene is in the movie.
Yes.
So we have to address it. You also mentioned the hidden camera thing. And the whole point of that is that the idea that nerds get revenge on the pies. And
yes.
And let's be honest, the pies deserved to get revenge on them. They were awful. They treated the nerds like crap. They belittled them. They were cruel. And why? Because they were good-looking popular girls, and that's what good-looking popular girls do. Or at least that's what they did back in the 80s.
It was the Mean Girls before Mean Girls were a thing.
Exactly. So the nerds decide to stand up for themselves and get them back. Personally, I think this scene is in the movie less as a means of revenge on the pies and more because it's an 80s sex comedy, and this is the perfect way for the producers to get some nudity into it.
I agree.
Plain and simple.
Agree.
That's what I felt as I watched it.
I totally agree.
So,
so I think I mentioned off the top that when I watched this movie, so I will say, this is the first time in 300 plus episodes, not that I've been on every episode, but in 300 episodes, that I've ever taken actual notes while I watch the movie. Usually I just watch the movie and I sort of form my opinions, and then you prompt me and I answer, and I just try and be spontaneous where I can. This one, I wanted to take notes. So I have a list of like a lot of little details that I picked up through the course of the movie. So as we talk about it, I'll mention a few of them. But one of the things that I noted down here, because I have some notes about the panty raid, was I did like that Wormser and Lamar, the two people who are the least likely to want to participate in this panty raid, Lamar obviously because being gay and Wormser because he's still little, they're the two that go into the attic and do the cameras, whereas all the other guys are running around and looking at boobs. So, and I never really picked up on that until this viewing. Like, obviously I knew those were the characters that did it, but I just thought it was it was obviously a deliberate choice by the writers to do that. And I thought, oh, that makes perfect sense. So.
So one thing I will say is this whole revenge thing that the nerds take, the one thing I will say, it felt like it was a little bit unbalanced. So I'd say that the alpha betas were even worse to the nerds than the pies were.
Yes.
But the alpha betas don't get it as bad, the revenge. You know what I mean? They get liquid heat on their jocks. I mean, sure, it's good, it's funny, but it kind of pales in comparison to installing hidden cameras and watching the pies undress. And then that reminds me too, like, how the hell did they not see the cameras?
That was the very next thing I put.
Wormser and Lamar, like you said, they're drilling a hole in the ceiling. The girl's sitting at her vanity, and you can totally see the drill coming through the ceiling behind her. I mean, it's totally obvious. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
Jeez. But again, there was a huge discrepancy, I felt, in the payback between the alphas and the payback against the pies. But, all that being said, does the film have problematic areas? Yeah, yes, you bet it does. But so do a lot of movies, especially movies from the 80s. Like I said, it's a time capsule from Reagan era America. So
Yeah.
I think we've addressed that. So let's talk a little bit about the box office.
Okay.
We actually covered this pretty recently because we reviewed Bachelor Party a few weeks back, also from 1984. So number one film at the box office in 1984 was, Derek?
Ghostbusters.
Yes, Ghostbusters was number one. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, number two. Gremlins, The Karate Kid, and Police Academy rounded out the top five. And then you've got Footloose, Beverly Hills Cop, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Beverly Hills Cop, the reason why it's so low, it came out in December. It made a lot of its money the next year. Okay?
Right.
And then Terms of Endearment and Romancing the Stone round out the top 10. Revenge of the Nerds made $40 million and only had a budget of $6 million. So it was good enough for
good return on investment.
Not bad. And it made 16th place at the box office that year. Finished just ahead of Breakin' and Bachelor Party, the aforementioned Bachelor Party.
And I got to think it had long legs on video and DVD. Like I got to think over time, it's probably continued to make money on the home rental market, home sales market.
And you mentioned that you saw this movie on home video and stuff, but here's something because I'm old. I saw this movie at the movie theater when it came out in 1984. I was 14 years old and I was able to get into the theater to see it. So it was rated R. No kids under 18 are supposed to be allowed in without an adult. But Derek, I grew up in a really small town.
Yeah.
And let's just say they were pretty lax when it came to enforcing the rules. I remember the guy at the box office, he says to me and my friend, we were going to see it. He's like, hey, you can't go see that movie without an adult. And I just point at some random dude ahead of me. I'm like, oh, that's my uncle right there. And the ticket guy's like, that'll be $5. like I didn't care. So I snuck into the movies to see this. And I loved it at the time. So again, this movie holds a lot of sentimental value for me too. Yours was on video, but like you, like I watched it over and over again and stuff like that. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the cast.
Okay.
Anthony Edwards. I thought he was the perfect nerd. He went on to do other stuff. He was in ER and Top Gun.
10 years, yeah.
I remember him in this movie called Gotcha. He was in it with Linda Fiorentino. Maybe one of the top 3 sexiest women that has ever lived. Oh my God. But I always thought no matter what this guy ever did, he was always a nerd to me. Like he just seems like a nerdy guy. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I mean, you and I are both nerds. So it's all good, right? My wife reminds me of that on a regular basis, too, by the way. But I just felt like Anthony Edwards wasn't able to sort of shake this typecasting from this movie. And he wasn't alone. Like a lot of movies, a lot of actors were typecast here. But I thought he was really good in this. You?
Yeah. No complaints. No, I thought he was believable as the nerd. I actually liked that he wasn't in the sequel for more than like just a minute. Because, I mean, we don't even really have to acknowledge the sequels. They were pretty bad. But I like that he did this one and then was sort of like, you know what? I'm going to go on and have a career and went and joined ER.
I liked this movie so much back in the day and still to this day that I have never watched a single sequel of it. It's like Meatballs for me.
You're a lucky man.
I refuse to watch the sequels because I know they suck. So I'm not going to watch them. Why would I? Yeah. I want to talk about Robert Carradine because he's probably one of the most talented cast members, I feel, in regard to his acting chops. So he's got the pedigree. His half-brother, David Carradine, from Kung Fu and Kill Bill, he was in too, right? And then Keith Carradine, his brother, was in Nashville. He was so good in that movie. And I don't know if you remember, he was in Madonna's video for Material Girl.
Really? I don't remember that.
So that movie, remember that the music video was all about her. She was like,
Marilyn Monroe.
Like Marilyn Monroe, Gentleman for Blondes, exactly.
Yeah.
And at the end of the video, she walks off the set and walks outside, and he is standing there with a single rose, and he's just like a working class guy. So that was his brother. But anyway, so Robert Carradine, I think, might be the most talented actor of all those Carradines. And so in 1981, he did a film called Heartaches up here in Canada, and he was nominated for a Genie Award nomination. He was so good in that movie, God. And I remember when I mentioned a couple weeks ago when I met him at the Comic-Con, I asked him about that and how he transitioned into Nerds. And the answer that he gave was, he's like, He's like, I didn't go from being a serious actor into being a comedic actor. He's like, I went from being a serious actor into this role. He's like, I'm the farthest from my character that you can even imagine. He's like, I got long hair. I smoke drugs. I ride a motorcycle. Like, I'm not like that character at all. This was a serious acting job for me, you know. But his character, too, I thought was so good. He was so optimistic. He drives the film, you know. He's
I found he would. You know what he reminded me of, and it dawned on me this time is he reminded me the way he played the character was sort of like Buzz Lightyear in Toy Story, where Buzz is a toy but doesn't acknowledge he's a toy. Lewis is a nerd who doesn't acknowledge he's a nerd. He doesn't. And it's not till, and he even says at the end of the movie, he's like, "I'm a nerd too. I just learned that tonight." And you're like, really? But no, I like that was, it's like he genuinely didn't feel that he should be painted with that brush. And I like that.
Yeah. Let's talk about Curtis Armstrong, Booger. So Risky Business, he was in that movie. He was very memorable in that. And then he didn't work for a few years. And then he did this. And he didn't originally want to do this film. And I think his quote was, he's like, there's no way I'm picking my nose on camera for anybody. Screw this. But it ended up defining his career. But he also did a lot of other stuff, like One Crazy Summer. He was Ak. It was great. Better Off Dead. Moonlighting. He was Herbert.
He was in the last couple of seasons of Moonlighting.
Yeah, but he hooked up with Elise Beasley's character.
Yeah.
And that.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you. Do you think Booger's a nerd? Because I really don't think he is.
Well, again, like we said at the top of the show, it's he's an outcast. Like I don't get the sense that he's smart like the rest of them. I think he's an outcast because he's gross, right? It's like he's creepy looking. He doesn't have good hygiene. He's always picking his nose. He tells dirty jokes. I mean, he's clearly creepy when they talk about, like, does any of you guys have dates for the party yet? And he goes, I've been combing the high schools all day. Like, let's assume for a minute that he is 1 year into college and the year before he was in high school. He also seems like the kind of guy that maybe failed a grade or two in high school.
Probably. Yeah.
So even though as a first year college student, he's probably supposed to be like 19, I always felt that he was a couple years older. Yeah. Like, obviously a lot of the actors were older than their characters were supposed to be, but that was always in my mind was Booger to me was that guy who failed a couple of years of high school, was the burnout. He smokes pot, he drinks, he says bad words, and he just doesn't give a crap about anything. How he got into college, I have no idea. But yeah, nerd, yes, in the sense of this movie, but by today's standards, no.
I like how when they're determining what to do, like, are we going to do any payback? You know, after the alphas really, really come down on them. And they're like, I don't know, like, should we try and get back them? And then he says, I say we blow their houses up.
Yeah.
I love that line.
The nuclear option, right out of the gate.
I also like the T-shirts he wears throughout the movie.
Yes.
So he wears one called Greasy Tony's, which is an actual restaurant in Tucson where they filmed the movie. His one shirt, remember when they were in line at the portable cafeteria they put in the gym?
Yeah.
It's high on stress. Just a great shirt. He's got one that's dirtbag. And then, of course, gimme head till I'm dead.
Yeah, that one I liked.
That was really good. But yeah, I think, like you, like, he's less of a nerd. I think he's more like a nerd ally. Again, he's just part of that misfit kind of thing. But
misfit, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Yeah.
So Ted McGinley, got to mention him. So he was a model in GQ magazine, and a casting director spotted him and offered him a role on Happy Days back in the 70s. And then he became a regular on The Love Boat. In 1982, he took Brooke Shields to prom. Isn't that crazy?
Her prom or his prom?
Her prom. And he gets this bad rap because everyone always says he's a TV series killer. But I think it's not all that fair to label him like that, because he did 4 seasons of Happy Days before it went off the air. He did Love Boat for 5 seasons from 83 to 87 before it went off. He was on 2 seasons of Dynasty, 85 to 87. And it lasted another 2 years after that. And Married with Children, he was on it for 6 years.
I was going to say, he was on that show a long time. Yeah. That didn't go off the air because of his participation.
Exactly. But he gets like labeled as like this TV series killer. Yeah. I mean, it's kind of unfair. But one thing for sure about him, he was one seriously good looking guy. Oh my God. I was watching it with my wife. She's like, my God, that guy's good looking. And he's actually on a show now that my wife has me watching called Shrinking. It's on Apple TV Plus.
Oh, yes, right. He's the husband.
Yeah, with Jason Segel and Harrison Ford. He's married
Yes.
to, what's her name? Miller. I can't remember her first name.
In real life or on the show?
No, on the show.
Yeah,
It's
Neighbor,
actually a
the
really
one
good
from
show.
the Drew Carey show.
Yeah. And she's got all this plastic surgery and stuff, but he just still looks really, really good. So
He's got the heated toilet, the gold toilet.
Yeah.
That's one of the gags. Yeah.
So one thing I would say about his character, Stan Gable, in this script originally, there was a subplot about him, Stan Gable, secretly being a nerd. And they actually shot scenes with him in his room, like reading books and studying and secretly wearing glasses. And they cut it all out, obviously. But the scene at the end, when the alphas have trashed the house and the nerds kind of rally everyone together there, remember he's sitting there and he's got this super sad look on his face?
Yeah.
Originally the script had him being sad and then joining them on the field as one of them. They cut that. I'm glad they cut that all out. It worked out better.
I don't think that would have resonated as well.
Yeah, I agree. But anyway, he was good.
I did notice, again, like I said, I noticed a lot of little details this time. So you were talking about how good looking Stan Gable is. Did you notice that his jersey is number 10? Because he's clearly a perfect 10.
Oh, interesting.
Again, I'm sure that was a very deliberate choice.
Probably, yes, by the costume department. Timothy Busfield, we'll mention him. This guy really made the most of his character. Like he did.
I was going to say, yeah.
Good. So the name Poindexter became synonymous with nerds after this. Do you remember there was a lyric in the Young MC song "Bust a Move"?
Yeah.
Chick walks by, wish you could sex her, but you're standing against the wall like he was Poindexter.
Yep.
All because of him and his character in this film. And the thing was, he didn't wear glasses, so the ones that they made him wear were so thick he couldn't see, so the other actors had to escort him around, even on camera. and one other thing about him, the violin music that he's playing in the gym. Remember when Gilbert and Lewis come back from being tarred and feathered?
Yeah.
And he's playing that screechy song. That's actually a super slowed down version of the violin part he plays at the end in the Talent concert.
Nice.
And if you go back and watch it and listen to it, like, it's actually a slow down version of the one he does at the end. Dun, 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 dun. Anyway, pretty cool.
Nice.
And then he improvised his big scene. Remember when they stay up all night and they're watching the pies and he like screams in pain and he moves his shirt to look at his crotch? He just improvised that on the spot and it cracked everyone up. If you go back and watch it, that scene right before the camera cuts away, you can hear the director laughing.
Oh, you definitely hear someone laughing.
Yeah,
I
it
just
was the
assumed it
director.
was supposed to be one of the guys on the couch.
No, it was the director because he just improvised this out of nowhere.
Nice.
James Cromwell. He was Jamie Cromwell.
Jamie Cromwell.
In the credits, yeah. So good as the dad. I really liked him here. So the drive to college, first of all, he's like, I got the cruise control set at 35. And there's like cars going by and honking. They're all mad at him. And I like how he's like, all you college guys ever think about is getting laid. I just wish I was going with you. And they're like, Dad.
Yeah.
And that whole scene I thought was really good. How he's really kind to Gilbert. It's obvious Gilbert's dad died. I'm assuming they don't mention it.
That was what I assumed as well.
Yeah. But James Cromwell says how he's like, your dad will be proud of you. And then the speech he gives to his son, Lewis.
Yeah.
And he's like, try not to break too many hearts. He's like, hasn't really been a problem for me yet, Dad.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really good. It kind of established like you really like these characters, right? From that opening scene I did. Yeah. And he's also the one that came up with that goose laugh. Apparently he modeled it after his own real life wife's laugh. And then he taught it to Robert Carradine. And then they put it in the film. So
nice.
John Goodman. What do you think of him in this?
Again, great as usual. Especially, obviously we've come to know him. He was in Roseanne. He's done tons of movies, and so we know he's a good actor. At least now we know he's a great actor. And after seeing him on TV for years and years, you like him. He usually plays a pretty good guy. And now when he plays a heavy, you're like, no, he's just an actor playing a mean guy. But back when we saw this, you're like, wow, that guy's a real dick. And it's but everything I was reading from the stuff, people were like, in real life, when they were shooting the movie, he was nothing like his character, nicest guy behind the scenes. Yep. I'm like, yeah, I believe it.
His speech, that he gives to the jocks at the end of the movie, my wife, she's like, this movie isn't just degrading to women, it's degrading to men. Mm-hmm. Because he's talking about how you can't be a man if you lose to nerds and you basically have to use violence, to get even with them. But all the way through the way he delivers his lines, I just, like, when the nerds are moving into the gym, and he's like, grab a bunk, move it or lose it. Just the way he delivers his lines is so good. Oh my God. But before he went into acting, he actually went to Southwest Missouri State University on a football scholarship.
Yeah, I believe it.
Yeah, discovered he loved acting and moved to New York. And he became friends with another young actor in New York, Bruce Willis, who was working as a bartender. Yeah, and they became friends around 79 or so. Okay, Larry B. Scott played Lamar Luttrell. Mm-hmm. Not gay.
Not gay in real life, no.
Lots of, rumors and stuff about when they were shooting the movie. He made it a point to prove he wasn't gay by dating just about every woman in the Tucson area when they were shooting the movie. And the thing was, before this movie and even after this movie, he played a lot of what you would call quote unquote macho roles. Like he was a Cobra Kai in Karate Kid. And if you notice in this movie, he's totally ripped. And but he just plays it all down so well. I really liked him in this movie. He might be one of my favorite characters in the whole movie, especially as I'm watching it now. Maybe even more now than when I watched it when I was younger.
Well, and I like that, especially through today's lens, that he was gay and he was out and he was a proud young gay black man in 1984. Like that in itself was brave. The fact that he knew who he was and did what he wanted to do. He wasn't hiding who he was. It wasn't like he was only gay behind closed doors. He was clearly out and just like, I'm living my best life. And today you wouldn't bat an eye at that. That's your expectation. You're like, okay, dude, do it, own it. But to see that in 84, like I can understand why at the time it would have been seen as a punchline because it just seemed so over the top and outrageous. But now looking back at it, it's like, he's a probably as much or more a fleshed out character than half the other guys are living in that building. So no, I think his character is, although, again, there are certainly scenes where they play it for laughs. I do think that they do a reasonable job of taking the character seriously and giving him an actual story. And
he's not only there to kind of represent sort of the gay sort of character, but also being black. Like multiple times he steps in, like the scene when they have the party and Lewis puts on Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. Yeah. The look on Lamar's face when he changes the album and he's like making eye contact with UN Jefferson. Like I laughed at that. It was so funny. And another thing with his character that I really like was his friendship with Wormser.
Yes.
Because in real life, when they were shooting it, Larry B. Scott, he looked out for Wormser on set because there was a lot of drugs and stuff going on during the production. And
in
he
the
helped.
80s? You're kidding.
I know. But he kept Wormser away from that stuff. Now, he was also in Space Camp with Kate Capshaw. And for me, I always remember when because you don't like Seinfeld, but I do. He did an episode of Seinfeld when George finds the picture in his boss's office and George is in the picture. Larry B. Scott's the guy at the photo mart that's supposed to remove George, but removes the boss from the photo by mistake, so he has to draw him back in, and he does it like a cartoon character.
I'm not familiar.
Again, you don't know, but he's like, hey, I had to draw that guy from memory. Like I always remember from that too. So it was good. Brian Toshi, want to mention Takashi. One of my favorite lines in this movie is when they're putting the liquid heat on the jock straps. And he can totally tell he's improvising. And he's like, oh, don't touch now. And they get these like tongs. And he's like, oh, it's like salad.
Oh my God, that makes me laugh every time. I don't know why. It's funny.
It's so funny. It's a funny line, And the thing is, Brian Toshi was in 3 different movie series. Revenge of the Nerds, because he did all this and the sequels. Police Academy sequels. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies. He was in all 3 of those, like, the sequels and everything. But for me, I always remember him from Saturday mornings back in the late 70s. He was on this show called Space Academy. I loved that show as a kid. Oh my God. This idea of like flying around in to other planets and stuff and explain. It was like a dream for 7-year-old me. I'm a nerd after all, but so Brian Toshi I thought was good. Bernie Casey, I want to give a shout out. The great UN Jefferson. Loved him in this movie. I absolutely loved him. I also liked him in Sharky's Machine, and he was also in Spies Like Us. He was a standout in that, but I really liked him here. Donald Gibb, Ogre, got to give a shout out to because I met him at the Comic-Con. And I had a childhood friend, and we named him Ogre after this character. Michelle Mayrink, I should mention, because she was also in Real Genius, one of your favorite movies.
That was sort of it, right? Those were her two big credits, and then she sort of fell off the face of the earth.
It's funny. I want to give her a special shout out because I felt like she was absolutely adorable in this movie. But in Real Genius, she was kind of like a weird goth kind of character, if I remember correctly. But in this movie, I thought she was like a perfect, cute nerd girl. I really loved her in this. She was great.
I thought she was very well cast. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about a few scenes from this one. We mentioned some of the problematic ones. So let's talk about like some of your favorite scenes. Do you have any? Like I have a few. I have probably 3. My favorite scenes.
Well, why don't you do your scenes? Like I said, I took notes, so I have probably a dozen or so things I want to just talk about.
One thing I want to talk.
But many of these are probably going to come up in your scenes. So let's do your scenes, and anything we don't do, we'll cover. Yeah.
One that jumps out is the montage. It might be the best montage ever. That song that they play when they're cleaning up the house.
Yes.
Oh my God. That is a great scene.
So one of the things I have a note here, speaking of songs, I just said, I forgot how good the soundtrack for this movie is. It is outstanding. There are so many good songs, including like big songs like Thriller and We Are the Champions. But then you have these other weird songs that you're like, I think I know that, like the one that they were playing during the montage where it sounds like David Bowie, but it's not. I've had to look it up multiple times. Like it's
Bone
not David
Symphony
Bowie.
Did it.
And then they, during
Got
the
to
party,
put one foot in front of the other, put the other foot down. It's just so catchy. And just totally to go back, when you mentioned the Queen song, the thing I liked about that at the end was that they play We Are the Champions, but then it transitions into like the Royal Philharmonic Orchestra.
Yes.
Over the closing credits. It's so good. You're right. The soundtrack was fantastic.
Soundtrack is great. Yeah. There's again, it's a lot of great 80s music, but it's not just like hits after hit. It's like, it's clearly like, what can we get within our budget? So it's a lot of stuff where you're like,
they would have spent some money on Thriller and We Are the Champions, but I also like the one at the party when they're, are you ready for the sex girls? The real fine, super duper real sex girls. Again, these songs kind of really just weave their way into the film. So I agree. That's a good point.
Yeah. I love
the music was good in this movie.
Yeah. The music was really good. Yeah. It really fit.
And I think that brings me to one of my favorite scenes. There's probably my 2 favorite scenes. And the first one is the party scene. So it's a very long scene, but it's amazing. I love how it starts off and it's like super boring. The pies don't show up. So Lewis puts on the music and Lamar changes it. And they decide to have Poindexter play the violin. And then Judy
That's not
plays
until after the Moose show up, though.
What's that? Right. That's true, I guess. Yeah, because they call the Omega Moose, and then she's like, oh, they're really spontaneous. So they come. And the thing is, they're actually super awesome girls. Yeah. And the one that hooks up with Lewis is like totally sexy with that raspy voice. And then there's the one that looks like Carol Kane. She hooks up with Poindexter. But I liked before they all start hooking up, they're like, well, maybe we should eat. Maybe we should watch TV. And Booger's like, hey, guys. Wonder joints. Like he's just got them in his pocket the whole time. He doesn't mention them until now, like as if. And of course, they get the joints, get the party rocking. And then UN Jefferson's sidekick. I don't know what his position was.
Yeah, I don't know. He was
at the fraternity office. I don't know.
Yeah,
but he's like smoking a joint in the scene. He's like, man, this is some good. So funny. I was laughing at that. And then when Booger is partying with the Moose and he's got like a bong going and then they're fast dancing. He's like, you Moose sure can party. And then he's slow dancing with them and he's grabbing their butt. It's like he's kneading dough. He's squeezing. I'm like, oh my God, that whole party scene is really, really funny. So did you notice anything in the party scene?
Yeah, I was going to say a couple of details
I did.
picked up.
Yeah.
So I noticed for the first time in this time that they were all wearing name tags, which I guess makes sense if they don't know anybody.
Yeah, I guess.
And then later on, where Lewis and Judy, they actually switch name tags in the scene where they switch glasses. They're wearing each other's name tags.
Oh, I didn't notice that. Yeah.
So I noticed that. I did notice that the frat house that they live in has a payphone on the wall. I noticed that during the party scene as well. It's like, okay, which again, I guess makes sense in the early 80s. A question for you, an unanswerable question. How many of those nerds do you think lost their virginity at that party?
All of them, all of them that got action.
The girl that was hitting on Lewis that took her out, she seemed like she knew what she was doing. So I'm guessing she probably wasn't a virgin, but I think most of the guys probably were. And then the last question I had was, after the pies show up and they let the pigs out in the house, and then all the pigs get rooted outside. Where'd all the pigs go?
That's a good point.
They just shoo them out of the house and they're gone.
They all run away, I guess.
So, again,
another thing I noticed in that scene too, which I had never noticed before, when they go in the kitchen and they're putting together all the food to take out, there's a whole watermelon on the table and all the food is fried chicken. So I'm thinking, is this racist? Like I was turning it over in my mind and I'm like, I really don't think it is. I think this is the concept of what these nerds think will appeal to UN Jefferson. Yeah. It's not malicious. It's like when he puts the music on, the swing low, sweet chariot. Like, it's like he thinks this is what would appeal to him because they just don't know. I agree with you. And I think, a thing I noticed in the detail was, the nerds we know all have names, but there were a handful of nerds that were in many of the scenes that don't have speaking roles, but are on screen a fair amount. And there's a guy that's wearing a turban or some sort of headdress. Probably looked like he was an Indian character. He's in a few of the background scenes, and in the scene where they're bringing the food out, he is adding spices to the chicken. So although it might be fried chicken, I don't think it's like your traditional Southern U.S. fried chicken. I think it's more like tandoori chicken or something. Like that was the impression I got, is this guy's like adding these unusual spices to the chicken. Again, it's so subtle. It's in the very background of a scene where something else is happening. But I did pick, again, because I was trying to pay attention to what was going on around the main characters this time. So I did notice that little tidbit. And of course, the party is going just amazing until the alphas and the pies ruin everything.
Yeah.
They suck. I hate bullies. I've mentioned that before. I've hated bullies my whole life. So in this movie, they set these pigs free, like you said, in the party, because the implication is that the moos are pigs.
Yeah.
They suck. I mean, I hate them. And there's that whole burning sign, like you mentioned, in the front yard. So the nerds decide that's it. We're going to get revenge, and we've revenge, we've talked about the revenge, is it too much, whatever. I think you be the judge. And let's just say this. The bullies had it coming to them.
Definitely.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
So one thing, so UN Jefferson decides to let them into Lambda. Mm-hmm. So do you think UN decided to let them join, like because he mentions he did it because he was proud that they were standing up for themselves.
Yep.
I wonder if the whole scene with that burning sign on the front lawn just hit a little bit close to home, and he felt aligned with these people again that were just being marginalized and terrorized. Or do you think I was reading too much into it? Because that stood out to me this time.
I think it all comes together. Now, again, though, the burning nerd sign happened before they got the fraternity started, right? Because then when they went to the Greek council, it was like, you need to be in a fraternity. So I think you and Jefferson, obviously, they'd explained what had been going on. But yeah, the fact that he was there at the party and then they said, like, this is what we did to get back at them. I think it all contributes. And I think had they not fought back or done something, I don't think they would have been accepted. And I think that's pretty clear with the way the movie comes together.
So then it got to my favorite scene of this whole movie, another long scene, which is the homecoming carnival.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God.
There is so much to like in this scene. So it starts with the arm wrestling. Mm-hmm. I love when Ogre can barely beat the one moo. And then he's like all winded and flustered. Like, that was good. And then Booger, of course, picks his nose and wins because he touches the girl with the snot. And this was another thing that I had never noticed. After he wins, he puts his finger up, right? And I remember that. But then when he goes back and he hugs the Tri-Lambs, Lewis recoils from him because of his finger. He wipes
his hand on somebody, too.
Yeah. So I thought that was good. And I'm also not sure why all the arm wrestling there was co-ed.
I was wondering that myself.
I don't know what that was all about.
Yeah.
Why the hell did a girl have to arm wrestle Ogre? Like,
I don't know. It just seemed weird to me, but
okay,
like,
so
it is what it is.
There's the tricycle race, and he gives them like trichlorobethylene, and he's like, this counters
not a real thing.
No, it's just a make believe thing, right? Counter affects all the effects of alcohol in your system. My God, Takashi riding that tricycle. It was like after the 10th beer, he's like, "Hey, how you feeling, Takashi?" He's like, "Oh, great!" Like, I just thought it was so funny. And then the belching contest.
Hang on. With the tricycle race, one of the details I noticed this time is on Takashi's helmet. He had little rear view mirrors on both sides of the helmet, which I never noticed before.
He did.
I never noticed that before.
You're right. And the other thing too is the song that they played when he's riding the tricycle. It's like a Japanese version of the British lullaby Daisy Bell.
Oh, is that what it was? I had to look up. There's two scenes where there's Japanese being spoken on camera that I couldn't find a translation for. One was the song, and the other is when they're all going around to try and find a place to live. Yeah. And then the Japanese guy just says it's Japanese, and at the end he goes, "Nerd." And I tried to look up to see what the translation. I mean, I can by context get a sense of what he was saying, but I wasn't able to find a literal translation for that.
But yeah, when Takashi was riding that Daisy Bell, it's a bicycle built for two. You know that?
Oh,
Daisy,
yes. Okay.
Daisy. It was famously sung by HAL 9000 in 2001: A Space Odyssey when he's being deactivated by Dave. So there was that too. So that's what they did there. The belching contest I want to mention because it was the one scene in the movie I let my kids watch, and they loved it. They were laughing so much. I love when Ogre spits beer on the crowd. Yeah. And then Booger's belch is like 9 seconds long, and they used a combination of a real belch and a camel to get that sound. I read that too. Yeah, I think it's so good. Oh my God!
A detail about the belching contest.
Sure. Again,
I'm looking for subtlety here. So Ogre goes first, and he's got the big trophy that he's been drinking out of the whole movie, right? So he takes a sip, he belches, and then he spits on the crowd, and then he sits down. Booger stands up. So Booger's sitting there having a cigarette. Booger stands up and puts the lit cigarette in the trophy.
He did, yeah.
To douse the cigarette. I never noticed that before.
Oh, I remember that.
When I noticed it, man, that scene got even funnier.
That whole scene was like laugh after laugh after laugh. It was so good. The javelin throw, when Wormser is like a master in aerodynamics, so he constructs a javelin specifically designed to accommodate Lamar's limp-wristed throwing style.
Yeah, that's like, that doesn't age well.
Exactly. It's like, what is going on here? And I love how he just he does this the whole. And when he did that scene, the actor Larry B. Scott, he was really sick. He did it in one take. That was it, and it was over. And then probably the best part of the whole Homecoming Carnival was the talent show. So, a couple things. There's those two guys doing that terrible stand-up comedy.
Okay.
Remember when they were like telling jokes about like dead ant and stuff? So when this movie actually premiered, those two actors showed up to the premiere in a limousine. They were the only two that did, which is so weird because they sucked. And then there was the RHO row your boat sketch,
which. Again, I've seen this movie a dozen times or more. Saw it for the first time when I was very, very young. Caught on to it just in this viewing. So the guys row the boat, and then the girls stand up, and they're like, Mary, and then they all wipe their mouth. And it's like, oh, okay. I guess we're supposed to imply what were they doing while the boys were rowing. Never picked up on that before this viewing. Again, just those little details.
And the other thing I noticed in that scene, the girl in the middle is really selling it. I really noticed that too. The one on the right looked like she was just like a paid actress to just get through this, but the one in the middle really sold it, I felt. So just again, little details. And then the Alpha Betas and the Pies do their football sketch where they reverse the genders. That's fine.
Did you notice the score?
69 to nothing.
69 for the Alpha Betas and zero for the nerds.
Exactly. I saw that too. But the nerds, man.
Oh yeah, so good.
Maybe the best part of the whole movie. Like, you've got Gilbert and Lewis basically channeling Devo.
Yeah.
And Booger playing the guitar dressed as Elvis. And for some reason, Takashi's dressed as a Native American.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell that was about.
Never understood why that was, but
when Lamar comes out and he's rapping, it's so good. The one thing I thought was I wished it was longer. It felt a little short. Like I was like,
I don't know. I think it was perfect. I think if it was a little bit longer, it might have started. I think it's like, I always felt that it was the perfect length. It was just enough to get you really pumped up and interested. And I think if it had gone on another 20 or 30 seconds, I would have been like, I would have started to lose interest a little bit.
Oh, I thought it was so great. And then, of course, the movie ends with Gilbert and Lewis's speeches. They're both short speeches, but so effective. And like you mentioned, like if you've ever been sort of picked on or put down or bullied, just come and join us. And that, again, is why the term nerds is just representative of anybody who's been marginalized or made to feel different, So, and I should mention, too, the scene when the Tri-Lambs come in. And my wife is like, oh, come on. And they're like playing like the bass guitar, boom, 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 boom. And it's like, she's like, this is stereotypical. Like, they're just supposed to be scary. I didn't look at it that way. I looked at it like they were there to stand up for their,
their brothers.
Their brothers. Yeah. And that was it. And it was like, and the coach, the football team, they all knew we're done.
Yeah.
We're done here. Like the nerds aren't on their own. Their nerds have allies. And that's the way I took that scene. So
same. I always felt that way. Yeah.
Any quotes? We usually mention quotes before we move on. Any quotes of the film? Like I had oh my God.
I mean, there were so many good quotes on this. I do have a few more things I want to cover, but let's do quotes first. So again, one of the ones that I always liked was when they're in the gym and they're standing in line, they're getting their lunch in the lunch line, and he goes, I met a girl, and he's like, did you get in her pants? She's not that kind of girl. Well, why? Does she have a penis?
Great line.
Oh, I love that one.
And when Booger is, he's standing at the house and Stan Gable's like, what are you looking at, nerd? And he's like, well, I thought I was looking at my mother's old douchebag, but that's in Ohio.
When they were living in the gym and then they're all turning off the lights and they're like, good night. And then someone goes, good night, Booger. And he just belches.
Yes.
Again, I laugh every time.
Because they all laugh. Man.
Yeah. Everybody there's my wife always gets on me every time, we watch TV and I'll let a fart out. She'd be like, you're so gross. Boys are so gross. I'm like, what are you talking about? Farts are funny. I'm doing this for us so that we can both laugh. And then of course she inevitably laughs. I'm like, see, you're laughing. She goes, that's not the point. Boys are gross. And it's the same thing with the belching. It's like, it's funny and it made me laugh.
And I liked when they put them in the gym, Booger and Tekashi just basically got put together by random chance.
Yeah.
And then they started like improvising and stuff. And then the director was like, just come up with some stuff, So they were talking to each other and like, well, let's play cards. And then it leads to one of my favorite things when he's like, Tekashi's like, they're playing cards, they're playing poker. And Tekashi's like, I think I have a frush.
Yeah.
And Booger's like, what the is a frush? And he's like, a frush. Yeah, well, I got 2 7s and 2 7s beats a frush. Just laughed so much at that. Oh, thank you. He says,
yeah,
that was really funny.
And then I like later he goes, when do I get to deal? And he goes, you got to win a hand first.
You got to win a hand first.
Meanwhile, we've seen them playing cards in multiple scenes, so it's clear that like Booger every time is just
keeps
like,
taking his money.
I win.
Yeah. Yep. Oh man! And there was, of course, that scene that always stands out to me when they go to the cops, or at least the sergeant or whatever he was, and he's like,
it was
campus police.
Campus police.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know what this world's coming to. See that man over there? We arrested him for mopery. He's like, what's mopery? Mopery is exposing yourself to a blind person. It's like, jeez, what the hell is that? It always stood out to me. I don't even think that's a real thing. It can't be a real
I looked
thing.
up mopery again, doing my homework.
Okay.
And it is defined as an act of committing a minor or petty offense. So it's not specifically exposing yourself to a blind person, but it is a real thing.
Nice. Okay, so you had a couple other things you wanted to get to?
Yeah, just a couple of small details. We got to most of them. So again, I did them in order as I was watching the movie. So first of all, Gilbert's mother at the very beginning. So let's assume that Gilbert's 20.
Sure. Yeah.
His mom, in my mind, looked pretty old. Now, I'll admit, you watch these older movies and, someone who looks, older by 80s standards, by today's standards, an actor of the same age would look better because, diet, exercise, health, all the rest of that. But I looked up the performer. She was 55 years old when she made this movie. And I thought, that sort of looks like I thought she was a little bit too old to be cast as his mother. But
she had him she would have had him when she was 30 something. That's reasonable.
Yeah, but that also worked on the other end of it. It worked with the idea that if Gilbert's dad has died, if the mom was older, the dad was probably older too. So, then, okay, that made sense.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. I double checked the math. 6,127 students, 58% of which are women, leads to 7,107.32 boobs.
Mm-hmm.
The math checks out.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Good job.
Yep. I got a little bit of a nitpick. So the dad's driving them to school, and he pulls up, and they take the chest off the trunk, and then they walk across the campus. Why the hell didn't he drop them off closer to the dorm?
I guess, yeah.
I mean, it led to a little bit of humor, and it led to them walking past the alpha betas, but it was like, again, I'm looking for little details. Did you notice throughout the course of the movie, Gilbert and Lewis wore pocket protectors?
Yes.
On the pocket protector, it said Skolnick Electronics.
Yes, I did notice that.
I never noticed that until
because I was watching it now in HD, I think, and I picked up on that.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
When they so one of the great scenes that I like is after they send out all their applications to the fraternities and they're like, did we get we got rejected again? It's like but it's because how many that they sent pictures what did he say?
to.
Next time we suggest you not include a group photo. And then he goes, did we send a group photo to everybody? Everyone but Lambda. But anyway, when he's reading the letter, he turns the envelope upside down and the group photo has been ripped up into small pieces and sent back with the rejection letter.
I didn't notice that.
I never noticed that before.
So
Again, just a little detail. I was like, oh my God. Like there's a lot of deliberate choices that were pretty funny. During the carnival, the alpha betas and the pies were doing a kissing booth. Now I get that used to be a thing, but I was so grossed out by that. Like it just seemed so weird. And in a post-COVID world, like that would never happen. But I was just like, it just seemed really, really bizarre to me.
But you also wouldn't be taking nude pictures of a girl, putting her on the bottom of a pie plate and putting whipped cream on it. That's the whole pie. The pie was just whipped cream.
Exactly, just
there was
whipped cream pie.
There was even pie.
The funhouse where Lewis and Betty end up having sex, what is the purpose of that? Like, it's not a ride. Is it literally just to go in there and hook up? Because the floor was clearly 4 waterbed mattresses put together. It just seemed like a bizarre thing. And like, was there at least a lock on the door? Yeah, was there at least like a lock on the door? Or was there always the risk that someone could walk in with them? Like, I don't know, but... And then the last detail I had was when at the end of the movie, after the alpha betas trash the house and the guys come back and they're looking around and they're like, oh my God, like what's going on? One of the things I noticed as part of the vandalism that the alpha betas did was they smeared shit on the wall and spelled out the word nerds. And I was like, gross. Like, how much do you have to hate someone to do that? Like, it just... Again, it was one of those little things where I noticed it in the background. I'm like, gross.
Again, that's why bullies suck and we hate them so
that
much,
was. Right? But no, other than that, no, we hit most of all the other ones we sort of got to through the course of the discussion. But yeah, I was overall, like, I felt the movie, I felt it really held up despite some of the issues that we spoke about at the beginning. I thought the message is still... is super prevalent. Like you could use these themes and read, like they talked about doing remakes and modernizing it. I read
Thank God they about didn't. It. Thank God that they started filming one with like what's the guy's name? He's in a show that my wife's watching now. Nobody likes this or something. Is it Brody or it was Adam Brody? I think is in that show, and he apparently was involved in a remake of this, and they started shooting, and then they shut it down. Thank God. Yeah, don't remake it. Leave it the way it is. I think you could use these themes to create a new original idea and not call it Revenge of the Nerds, but basically have it, in this same family of film or even like a comedy prestige series. I think it would work very well. You could really redo this story in a way and modernize it because I think there's people always feel excluded for various reasons, and there's always, like you said, there's always bullies that try and exclude others for the stupidest reasons. So I think the message of the movie still holds up really well. I think a lot of the humor holds up really well. I think, like you said, when you had Yancey watch it, not having grown up in that time or with this movie, I think younger people are going to have a harder time seeing what you and I see out of it. But I do think that people that are sort of our generation are going to, if they rewatch this, they would, like us, find this still has a lot of humor while still acknowledging that there are problems. So, absolutely. So, do you want to rate it out of 10 for me? Give it an 8.5. Oh, I'm going to go 9. Yeah, I almost did a 9, but I'm going to go 9. Like, it's that high for me. Like, believe it or not, if after all these years, all the problems, I still think it ranks up there. So, yeah. I don't know. That's what I got. All right. So what do you say that we have some?
Fun with Caveman.
All right, so it was my movie, so it was over to you for trivia. So what do you have for me? What are you going to put me through?
Well, I mean, we're going to go with what we know. I'm going to play a little game we like to call Pick the Flick.
Pick the flick. Yeah, pick the flick. You get the synopsis, then pick the flick. You get the year, pick the flick. Oh, well, we all know how this works. I think you give me the year and the synopsis, and I got to pick a movie, right?
Indeed, indeed.
All right, so what do we got?
All right. All of these movies have the word revenge in the title.
Okay.
Now, I will tell you that many of them are sequels. Like probably half of them are sequels, because that seems to be a very popular word to use in the title of a sequel. So if you're not sure, guess that it's a sequel to something, and there's a good chance you're going to be on the right track. So,
all right, sounds good.
All right. The first one is from 2005. And I had to sort of change the synopsis description a bit so it wasn't so obvious, but I think you're still going to get it. 3 years into a devastating war, the general pursues a new threat while his subordinate is lured by an evil politician into a sinister plot to rule the galaxy far, far away.
And sorry, what year was it?
2005.
Oh my God. I don't know.
To rule the galaxy far, far away. It's Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith.
You see, you got to remember, I have blocked out the prequels completely out of my memory.
Yeah, probably for the best.
Yeah, sorry.
All right. I thought you might have got that with the far, far away.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking too. Is that sounds like Star Wars or something, but I don't know if we're gonna.
All right. This one is from 1987, and I believe you have even seen this movie because I'm confident you've mentioned it before in this podcast. An investigative news reporter and her daughter are kidnapped by a white slave king after getting too close with her investigation. Now that she has escaped, she seeks revenge.
1987?
Mm-hmm.
Is it Revenge of the Killer Tomatoes?
It is not.
Oh, I don't know then.
It is a movie called Sweet Revenge.
Oh, I've never even heard of it.
Oh, I can't remember the name of the lead performer, but I'm sure you've said, oh, yeah, no, I really like her. I've seen all her work. So, all right. This one you probably won't get. I'll be honest. There's a few newer ones I had to throw in just because I didn't have enough questions. Sure. So this one you're not going to get. This is for the listeners. It's from 2010. Two women plot revenge against the woman marrying their friend's ex-boyfriend.
And sorry, what was the year?
2010.
Oh, God. No idea.
It's called Revenge of the Bridesmaids.
Is that like a sequel of Bridesmaids?
Yeah, beats the hell out of me. No, I don't think it is.
Oh, okay.
All right. This one is a sequel. I'll give you that hint. It's from 1985. You should get this.
Okay.
A teenage boy is haunted in his dreams by a deceased child murderer who is out to possess him in order to continue to his reign of terror in the real world.
Definitely one of the Nightmare on Elm Street movies.
Yes.
Revenge. Freddy's Revenge? Does that mean?
Yes.
Oh, okay. That was
Part 2. Nightmare on Elm Street 2. Freddy's Revenge. See, I figured you'd get that one. All right. This one's a classic, 1958. Again, based on the contextual clues, you should get this.
Okay.
Having escaped execution and assumed an alias, the doctor transplants his deformed underling's brain into a perfect body, but the results prove to be mortally perilous.
Well, it sounds like you're talking about Frankenstein. So is it Frankenstein's Revenge?
Or could it be something similar?
Revenge of Frankenstein?
There you go.
Oh, okay.
Frankenstein from 1958. Right. Yeah.
I'm guessing on that one, but okay.
Yeah, good guess. Okay. This is another sequel.
Okay.
From 1989.
Okay.
I know for sure you've seen the original, like the part one. 1 year after the events of the last film, the Shape returns to Haddonfield once again in an attempt to kill his now mute niece.
Is it Halloween?
It is one of them.
Oh, because of the shape. Is it, I don't know what, do I have to get the number right?
Nope. I just need the revenge part.
Revenge of Michael Myers?
Yes.
Okay.
They're not hard once you got that part.
I guess,
It was
yeah.
Halloween 5, the Revenge
5.
of
I
Michael
never would have
Myers.
got that. I would have.
But you've seen the first one, right?
Oh, yeah. I saw the first one. Saw the first one and the second one. I saw the first 3, actually. I saw the third one as well.
Okay.
Then
I have never seen any of them. They all look stupid. All right. This one's a little newer. You're probably not going to get this one. From 2009. This is, again, another sequel.
Okay.
Sam Witwicky leaves the heroes behind for a normal life. But when his mind is filled with cryptic symbols, the villains target him, and he is dragged back into the war.
No idea.
This was the sequel to the Transformers movie. It's called Transformers Revenge of the Fallen.
I think I've actually heard of that one. So
It was just okay.
Yeah.
All right. We'll just jump to the next one. This one's from 1978, so a little more in your wheelhouse.
okay.
When the mistaken news of a detective's death is announced, he tries to take advantage of it and goes undercover to find out who tried to kill him.
From 78.
It's a sequel.
Is it Revenge of the Pink Panther?
Yes, yes it is. Oh, look at you.
Oh, look at me. Oh, wow.
Nice.
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 Oh, wow.
Yeah, I had to remove Clouseau's name from the clue. That was a little too obvious,
Right,
so I just
right.
referred to him as the detective. All right.
I was trying to think of the year and then everything else. And
Yeah.
just
Okay.
putting it
This
all together.
one, I mean, I never even heard of this one, but again, contextual clues, you might get it. Not a sequel. Sort of not a sequel. 1996. A suburban defense lawyer mistakenly gives her troubled daughter a wooden puppet belonging to a deceased serial killer. The toy fills the void of friendship in the daughter's life, but she begins to act increasingly strange and violent.
It's definitely not like Child's Play,
No,
Revenge, or anything.
it's not that franchise.
Then I have a doll. I don't know.
Wooden puppet.
Marionette's Revenge.
I give you half points. It's Pinocchio's Revenge.
Pinocchio's. That's a movie called Pinocchio's Revenge.
Apparently. All right. This one's from 1983.
Okay.
Don't overthink this one. After ninjas kill his family, a man and his son come to America to start a new life. He opens a doll shop, but is unwittingly importing heroin in the dolls. When his friend betrays him, the man must prepare for the ultimate battle.
Well, since you said ninja, is it Revenge of the Ninja?
Yes. There you go. See? Don't overthink it.
Totally
That's
guessing.
right on the nose.
I have not seen or even heard of a lot of these revenge movies.
No, me neither. Well, I gave you 2 nice, easy ones coming up here at the end. I guarantee you're going to get them both.
Okay, lay them on.
All right. First one's from 1987.
Okay.
This is another sequel. A widow believes that her family is deliberately being targeted by another deadly predator in search of revenge.
Oh, it's Jaws the Revenge.
Yes, Jaws the Revenge.
Oh, that movie's so terrible. I haven't even seen it. It's so
All
bad.
right.
Refuse to
The
watch it.
last one on the list from 1985, right in your sweet spot. You guarantee you're going to get this. Let me finish the whole clue first.
Sure.
As graduation nears for the class of 1955, the gang once again faces off against their old enemy who wants them to throw the school's championship basketball game because he's betting on the opposite team.
I just mentioned this one a couple weeks ago. It's Porky's Revenge.
Yes.
Yes. I can't try to remember the context of how we did that
when
one.
we did the third part installment.
Oh, yes, the third installment.
I didn't even know they made a third part. For
Oh, I remember. I went to see this in the movie theater when it came out. I remember that. Some of those were pretty tough. The revenge movies, I'm not really all that up on, apparently.
No. And of course, I left off. I think there's a Kevin Costner movie straight up just called Revenge. But I'm like, that was a little on the nose.
I thought you were going to try and trick me with Revenge of the Jedi, because that was what it was originally called.
I was going to, but I was like, we'll just stick with the real ones. Yeah.
And then he went back to it with Revenge of the, what was it?
This Revenge of the Sith.
Sith, again. Prequels, who gives a crap? Okay, so that's it. So next time we're going to be back with a topic. I guess probably one of our top 5 lists. So we'll do
that's
that.
probably about right.
That probably makes sense. So I'll tell you what, there's been a lot of fun. We really went into this movie a lot, which is great. We had a lot to say about it. But until next time, I'm Chris McBride. That's Derek Myers. And we both want to say thanks for taking the time to listen to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World. You can contact Chris and Derek at popgoesyourworld.com. Please take a minute and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.